She wore white like an angel. She smiled like a queen. And then, she crushed my nephew's hand under her heel, in front of 30 silent witnesses. Then her goon tried to drag me out. But here's the twist. 3 minutes later, she was the one screaming on the floor, begging for help. And just when you think that was the end, something happened that shut down the entire HOA. Want to know what broke first? Her leg, her power, or the silence? They called it the Community Unity Fair. A sunny little phrase, printed on glossy flyers, slid into every mailbox like confetti. But I knew better. When a homeowners association throws a party, it isn't for celebration. It's a show of power. A carefully curated display to remind you who owns the leash. And this time, I made the mistake of showing up, with my 9-year-old nephew in tow. He was a quiet kid, bookish, a little awkward, but brilliant in the ways that matter. That afternoon, while adults mingled near fake charcuterie boards and HOA board members posed like royalty, my nephew found a quiet corner near the window. He pulled out his Lego set, tiny bricks in soft colors, and started building. His little hands moved with care, every snap precise, every turret deliberate. It was his world, and for 5 peaceful minutes it was untouched. The room, though. The room reeked of tension. The way people whispered behind their champagne flutes, the tight smiles, the way everyone avoided eye contact with the HOA president's seat, still empty. Then the double doors opened. A chill cut through the air. She walked in. Karen, wearing a cream-white dress like she was descending from heaven. If heaven had a board of directors and a rulebook thicker than the Bible. Her heels clicked like gunfire on the marble floor. Every step was a declaration. People straightened up. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. One man actually bowed his head slightly. Her eyes scanned the room like a hawk, then locked onto the only thing out of place. The Lego castle. And the child building it. Her lips curled into something that pretended to be a smile. But I'd seen enough wolves in my life to know the difference. She didn't walk toward the refreshments, she walked straight toward my nephew. And I swear the room held its breath with me. Something was about to break, and it wasn't going to be plastic. She stopped 2 feet from him. My nephew didn't even look up, too absorbed in crafting the eastern tower of his Lego castle. It was intricate, even by adult standards, balanced, measured, just like him. The boy didn't need much, just silence, a space to breathe. But Karen saw that silence as defiance. "What is this?" Her voice sliced through the air. He glanced up, blinking behind his glasses. "It's a castle," he said quietly. Karen laughed. But it wasn't amusement. It was mockery, cruel and curved at the corners. "A castle," she repeated, like tasting something bitter. "In a government-regulated meeting space? During a formal HOA event?" I stood frozen for half a second, caught off guard by how fast she zeroed in. "Excuse me," I said, stepping forward. Karen's eyes barely flicked in my direction. "Is this yours?" "He's with me. He's my nephew." She clicked her tongue. "We don't allow unsupervised minors at official proceedings, especially not ones spreading toys like litter." My fists clenched. "He's not unsupervised. He's quietly sitting in a corner, harming no one." She crouched, gracelessly, and picked up a loose Lego tile between her fingers like it was toxic waste. "This," she sneered, "is visual pollution. There are codes, sir. Expectations." "Your code doesn't apply to children's hands," I shot back. "And what kind of monster bullies a 9-year-old for being creative?" Karen straightened slowly, her lips stretched in a grin so false it cracked at the corners. "I enforce order. You think that's bullying? You don't know what chaos looks like, yet." She turned her back on me and faced the boy. "Pack it up," she snapped. "Now, before I have someone do it for you." My nephew, confused, began to gather his bricks with trembling fingers. His bottom lip quivered. I moved forward. "Touch his things, Karen, and—" "Or what?" She spun, now inches from me, You'll raise your voice? That's emotional disturbance. Grounds for removal. Shall I call security? And then she looked at the castle again. Her gaze hardened. Before I could react, Karen lifted her foot and brought her heel down. Hard. Right on the child's hand. There was a snap. And then he screamed. And I unleashed. If you were standing there, watching a child scream under her heel, would you have stayed silent? Comment 3 if you know exactly what I did next. The sound was sharp, sickening, like a twig being broken in half. But it wasn't a twig. It was his hand. My nephew's scream tore through the air, primal and pure. He clutched his wrist, curled into himself, face contorted with pain. I saw his thumb bent at an unnatural angle, already swelling. Tears streamed down his cheeks, and for a moment, time stood still. Karen just looked down at him, not horrified, not apologetic, but annoyed. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she scoffed, stepping back, brushing non-existent dust off her heel. "If he hadn't been playing in the way, this wouldn't have happened." I froze, not from fear, but from the amount of fury flooding my chest. The kind of fury that doesn't burn, it calcifies, turns every breath into glass. "You broke his hand," I growled. Karen arched an eyebrow. "That's quite an accusation. I barely touched him." "He's 9, I shouted. "You stomped on a child's hand. You crushed it, in front of a room full of people." Karen crossed her arms. "And yet no one here is saying a word. Maybe they understand what you don't. Rules matter. Cleanliness matters. Respect for shared spaces matters." My hands trembled, not from weakness, from restraint. I glanced at the room, blank stares, downcast eyes. No one moved. One woman actually turned her back. Cowards. Karen continued, smug. "Now take him and leave before I have you both formally trespassed from all future HOA functions." I took one slow step forward. She didn't move. "You think this is over?" I said low, deadly calm. "You think you can just stomp on a child and walk away?" She smiled, like I was the one being dramatic. "You touch me," she said, "and it's assault. Cameras are rolling. You'll be the one in cuffs." "You think I care about cuffs?" I hissed. Then a shadow moved behind her. Daniels, 6'3", security for the HOA, shaved head, thick arms folded, eyes locked on me like a hunting dog waiting for a whistle. Karen stepped aside. "Daniels, escort this man and his nephew off the premises." He moved forward, slow, deliberate. My nephew whimpered behind me, and something inside me snapped. Daniels stepped forward like he'd been waiting for this moment. Thick boots, security badge glinting. His face was carved from stone, eyes dead with loyalty. Not to justice, but to Karen. "You need to back off," he rumbled. "I need you to move," I replied, standing my ground. Daniels reached to his belt, fingers brushing the baton clipped to his side. "That a threat?" he asked, squinting. "No," I said, stepping forward. "It's a warning." Behind him, Karen smirked like she'd already won. "See?" she chirped. "Aggressive, violent, exactly what I expected from someone who clearly doesn't understand structure." I turned my eyes toward her. "You don't understand what you've done. You didn't just break a child's hand," I said, voice low, each syllable carved with steel. "You gave him a memory that will bleed into every dream he has for the rest of his life." Daniels moved fast, but I moved faster. The moment his hand reached for the baton, I shifted my weight, pivoted hard, and slammed my elbow into his jaw. His head snapped sideways. He staggered, surprised. I didn't stop. I drove a knee into his gut, then spun behind him and delivered a sharp, punishing elbow to the base of his skull. Daniels crumpled, groaning, stunned on all fours. Gasps erupted across the room. Some people screamed. Others fumbled with their phones. No one moved to help him. Karen backed up a step, her confidence cracking. Her lips parted, as if to bark another order, but no sound came out. "You picked the wrong child," I said, glaring straight through her. She looked down at Daniels, moaning at her feet. "That's your dog?" I spat. "Then maybe you should have trained him better." Karen blinked, no longer the queen, just a scared woman in a white dress, standing ankle-deep in silence. I stepped past Daniel's collapsed body. Karen took another step back, but there was nowhere left to go. Her heel clicked once on the marble, then slipped slightly. The first crack in her fortress of control. I turned my head toward the room. "Anyone else want to threaten a 9-year-old?" I called out. Silence. The only thing I heard was my nephew, sniffling behind me. I looked back at Karen. "I warned you," I said. Then I reached for her shoulder and pulled her out into the open. She stumbled when I yanked her forward. Karen, once so composed, so towering with self-importance, nearly twisted her ankle trying to regain balance in those pristine white heels. I didn't care. I shoved her into the center of the room. "Stand there," I ordered. Her face flushed red, half from rage, half from embarrassment. "You have no authority to touch me," she shrieked. "You're finished. Do you hear me? You just assaulted a security officer." I stepped in closer. "You assaulted a child." I pointed to my nephew, cradling his broken hand with tears streaking his cheeks. "That isn't going away. That pain, that scar, that trauma. You branded that boy for life, and you expect to walk away in heels?" Karen rolled her eyes, but her voice trembled now. "I'm going to sue you into the ground. HOA litigation, civil charges, battery, intimidation, defamation." "You missed one," I cut in. She blinked. "Reckoning." Her lips moved to protest, but I moved first. I drove my knee up and into her left leg, just below the kneecap. The impact landed with a wet, brittle pop. Her scream shot through the ceiling. Karen collapsed, legs buckling, fingers clawing at the air for support. She hit the ground hard, one arm bent beneath her, hair tangled across her face. The spotless white dress now streaked with floor grime and sweat. Mascara ran in black rivers down her cheeks. The entire room froze. I stared down at her. "This," I said clearly, "is what happens when no one else in the room has the spine to stop you." A man in the corner dropped his phone. A woman gasped, hand over her mouth. Karen moaned in pain, rocking slightly, still trying to bark orders through gritted teeth. "Daniels! Call! Get him! Get me! Help!" Daniels wasn't getting up, and no one else moved. The silence wasn't shock anymore. It was relief. A reign had ended. Right there, on the HOA's marble floor. I turned back toward my nephew. He looked up at me with wide eyes, lip trembling. But for the first time, he wasn't scared. He nodded. I gently knelt beside him. "It's over," I said softly. But I was wrong. The fall was only the beginning. The reckoning was about to begin. Was I wrong to break her knee after what she did to that boy? Or was that the only justice she'd ever understand? Let me know in the comments. Karen writhed on the floor like a wounded animal, clutching her leg, sobbing, mascara smeared like war paint. But what struck me more than her cries was the room's stillness. 30 pairs of eyes stared, but not at me. They were staring at her, not with pity, with recognition. The veil had cracked, and I wasn't letting it seal shut again. I stood tall and turned to face the crowd. Phone cameras were rolling now, shaking hands holding them, capturing every second. I raised my voice. "You all watched her do it." No one answered. "She stomped on a 9-year-old's hand. She called that order. And you just stood there." A man shifted awkwardly in his chair. A woman looked down at her shoes. I took a slow step forward. "This isn't the first time, is it?" Still silence. So I pressed harder. "Who else has she humiliated? Fined for a garden hose? Screamed at for a lawn chair? Threatened over a mailbox color?" Stillness cracked. A voice came, small from the back. "She made my daughter cry for playing hopscotch on the sidewalk." Then another. She forced my husband to repaint our front door 3 times because she said the shade of blue felt poor. A third voice. She told my son he couldn't walk our dog unless we paid an extra pet visibility fee. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. I turned slowly toward Karen. She stared back, eyes wide with the beginning of fear. Real fear. Not of violence, but of exposure. She had ruled by intimidation, by isolation, until now. Now the dam had burst. She's not powerful, I said to the crowd. She's protected. By your silence. By your fear. Someone murmured. Not anymore. Karen whimpered. You can't do this. This isn't legal. No, I said, stepping over Daniel's body. You're not legal. You're not elected. You're not moral. And now you're not protected. People stood up, one by one. First, a woman in a red cardigan. Then a retired vet I'd seen mowing alone for months. Then a teenage girl holding a younger brother. They weren't just standing. They were rising. And Karen, she couldn't crawl fast enough to escape it. The reckoning wasn't mine alone anymore. It had become ours. The sirens arrived too late. By the time the first cruiser rolled up to the HOA building, Karen's empire had already crumbled. Beneath truth, beneath unity, beneath the kind of fury that spreads once people finally remember they're not alone. She lay slumped against the glass podium, leg twisted awkwardly, foundation streaked with sweat and shame. Her crown, if she'd ever worn one, was shattered. Still, when the officers pushed through the crowd, she raised her chin, like she still ran the place, like the marble floor wasn't stained with her collapse. "Officers!" she barked. "Arrest that man immediately! He attacked me! He assaulted our security officer and endangered a child!" One of the officers, mid-50s, calm eyes, stepped forward. Badge read, Deputy Lieutenant Halderman. He looked at me first, then the room, then Daniels, groaning and bleeding from the mouth. Then, finally, Karen. "I'll be happy to make arrests," Halderman said, voice level. "But I want to hear from the people who were here. All of them." Karen scoffed. "You don't need statements. You need handcuffs." "We'll get there," Halderman replied. "Just not the way you expect." He turned to the crowd. "Anyone wish to give an account?" It was like opening a floodgate. A woman stepped forward, holding up her phone. "I have video. She stomped on that boy's hand." "She's been abusing her power for years," another said. "She fined me $900 for planting sunflowers." "She told my son his wheelchair made the sidewalk look uneven," a man growled. Karen's lips curled into panic. "Lies! They're making it up! He threatened me, look at him!" Halderman turned to me. "Sir?" I held up my hands. "I hit Daniels. I broke Karen's knee." "That part's true." Gasps scattered. "But only after she crushed my nephew's hand under her heel." I pointed toward the boy, now sitting quietly, pale, his tiny arm splinted with a makeshift sling. He screamed. She smiled. "That's when I stopped asking permission." Halderman nodded slowly. Then to Karen. "Ma'am, based on preliminary witness accounts and physical evidence, I'm placing you under arrest for aggravated assault on a minor." Karen's jaw dropped. "Me?" He didn't repeat it, just pulled the cuffs from his belt. "Turn around." She didn't move, so he helped her. The click of the cuffs echoed louder than any siren. She cried. Not because of pain, because the throne she built had become a cage. As they lifted her off the floor, I met her eyes. "You ruled with fear," I said quietly. "But fear has a short lifespan. Today, it expired." And for the first time, Karen had nothing to say. Karen was dragged out past the very podium she used to lecture from. Not one person clapped, but no one stopped it either. The HOA's glass doors slammed shut behind the officers. For a moment, no one in the room moved. It was like waking up after a long nightmare, blinking, unsteady, unsure what to do with the daylight. Then someone started clapping. One clap, then two. Then the room erupted. It wasn't for me. It wasn't for violence. It was for the truth. For the break in the silence. Daniels was hauled away minutes later by paramedics, muttering about lawsuits through broken teeth. No one even bothered to wish him luck. I sat beside my nephew as a medic knelt to stabilize his hand. He whimpered once but didn't cry. The kid was braver than half the adults in that room. "Is she going to jail?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. She's going where people go when they forget children aren't obstacles. Outside, blue and red lights still painted the pavement. But inside, the color was returning to the community. People began to talk, really talk. For the first time in years, neighbors exchanged stories without fear. "She fined me for having wind chimes," someone said. "She banned lemonade stands," said another. Said they were visual clutter. "She locked the community pool because someone brought pool noodles." It was almost surreal, an avalanche of suppressed stories tumbling loose now that the Queen had fallen. HOA members who once walked like gods among us were now just people. People who had enabled her. And we weren't letting them off easy. That night I uploaded my phone footage. Not just of the stomp. Not just of the knee. But of the room's reaction. The moment the community stood up and didn't sit back down. It spread faster than wildfire. Reddit. TikTok. YouTube. Hashtag HOA Reckoning trended by morning. News vans camped outside the HOA building within 48 hours. The city issued a statement. Local representatives launched an inquiry into improper governance and unlawful penalties issued by Karen and her board. By the end of the week, Karen was charged with aggravated assault, child endangerment, and abuse of authority. Daniels lost his license and faced charges of excessive force and obstruction. Every single fine from the last 18 months was frozen and placed under review. But it wasn't the legal action that made people cheer. It was the removal of the signs. Karen had plastered rules everywhere, on fences, gates, lampposts, no toys on lawns, no talking after 9 p.m., no flags without permission, no life outside the rules. They came down, one by one. I watched a war vet rip down the no flags sign and replace it with a folded American flag he'd kept in his garage for years. An old woman who'd once been fined for humming too loudly while gardening? She sang that day. I walked through it all slowly, hand resting on my nephew's shoulder. "You did that," I said. "You knocked over the first domino." He shook his head. "You did." We met halfway, but not everything had healed. There were still scars. Still people afraid to step forward. Still fear lingering like smoke. That's why I wasn't done. Karen may have fallen, but the system that protected her still stood. And until that burned to the ground, I wasn't stepping away. I was stepping up. It took 3 weeks for the marble floor to be scrubbed clean. But they could never quite get the stain out. Where Karen's knee hit the tile, where her screams echoed through the room, there remained a thin, pale line. Barely visible, but I saw it every time I passed, and I made sure my nephew saw it too. "Why don't they fix it?" he asked one morning as we walked by. "They did," I said. "Just not with bleach. They left it so no one forgets what happens when people like her go too far." The HOA building was quiet now. Not abandoned, but different. The board had been dissolved, pending a full restructure. The old rules, gone. The iron-fisted fines, frozen. The fear, unwelcome. The new community meetings weren't hosted by a president with a fake smile and a foot on everyone's neck. They were held in folding chairs, under string lights, outside the very building Karen once ruled from. No suits, no glares, no secret bylaws designed to crush joy. Just neighbors, talking like neighbors. But not everything healed with handshakes. Some people still looked over their shoulders, still whispered when things got too loud. Karen had trained them well. Fear is a habit, and I understood that. But I also understood how to break it. So I showed up. Every meeting, every cleanup day, every community moment that asked for presence instead of power. I brought my nephew when he felt strong enough to come. And when he didn't, I sat beside his hospital bed for follow-ups, holding his good hand and telling him that monsters only win when we stop telling stories about how they fall. The media lost interest eventually. That's what they do. One viral clip dies, another takes its place. But justice doesn't go viral. It sticks. Karen pled guilty to assault and child endangerment. Tried to pin it on stress, on hormones, on ungrateful residents. No one bought it. She received 18 months, reduced for first-time offense. She'll be out before the next election cycle. But she won't be back here. No HOA board in the state will touch her. Not after what we exposed. Daniels, stripped of his security credentials. He took a deal, walked away without jail time, but with a ruined record. He left town. The flag still flies on the old fence post. The wind chimes Karen once banned now sing every evening. Sometimes I sit outside just to hear them. My nephew's hand will never bend quite right again. But he builds differently now. Stronger, faster, not with Lego, with wood, nails, drills, with fire in his fingers and pride in his chest. I'm building a bench, he told me last week, for the spot where she stepped on me. I didn't ask if it was for revenge. I knew better. It was for permanence, for memory, so people could sit there, rest their feet, and never forget what stood here before the people stood up. What happened that day in the HOA boardroom wasn't just a moment of anger. It was a reckoning, not just for Karen, but for a community that had been silenced for too long. Some people say I went too far, that I should have waited for the law. But here's the thing. The law only works when people are brave enough to stand up for what's right. And sometimes, silence is the greater violence. Karen didn't just break bones. She broke trust. She weaponized authority to control, isolate, and punish anyone who didn't fit her mold of acceptable. And the scariest part? We let her. For years, people looked away. They told themselves it wasn't their fight, that someone else would speak up, that things weren't that bad. But things are always that bad, for the one being stepped on. That day taught me something I'll never forget, and I hope you don't either. The moment you stop speaking up for others is the moment you give permission for cruelty to thrive. And here's the truth. Karen wasn't special. There are Karens in every neighborhood, every office, every institution. People who manipulate fear, twist rules, and hide behind authority to hurt others. But power isn't permanent. The only thing more powerful than fear is unity. One voice, easy to ignore. 30 voices, that shakes the walls. And when those voices are backed by truth, by courage, by community, even a queen in heels can fall. Today, my nephew is healing. Not just his hand, but his confidence. He told me the other day, I'm not scared of people like her anymore, because I know someone will stand up. That's the kind of world we should build. Not one where children are told to stay quiet, but where they grow up knowing that when something wrong happens, someone will speak. And sometimes, that someone has to be you. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed someone abuse power, and everyone else just looked away? What would you have done in that room? Would you have stood up, or stayed seated? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if this story meant something to you, if it lit a fire in your chest, made you angry, made you think, then don't scroll past. Tap that like button. Subscribe for more real, raw stories. And hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. Because sometimes we don't need another news report. We need a story with a spine. And if no one else is willing to tell it, I will. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay sharp, stay kind, and when the silence gets heavy, be the one who breaks it.